Hey guys, it's Michael and I'm back for another reaction video. Today we're back with some more Wendigoon. I actually had saw this like in my recommended and it sounded so crazy. I don't know what it is. And I was about to just watch some music videos and I saw this. I was like, "Oh, what the heck? What is that?" I assume it's some kind of like creepypasta thing, like some urban legend sort of thing that uh people don't normally know about, I guess. But it sounds really cool, so I'm gonna watch
Hey
it.
everyone, so as you probably know at this point, I
I might I might split it in two videos. I don't know
for
yet.
one love horror. And one of the things that's so important for me in a horror setting is that of the setting itself. Most often, horror like Friday the 13th or the Halloween series takes a setting we're all familiar with, and that's used as the basis for whatever the scare is. And then several of my favorite horrors, like the 1982 movie The Thing, take a setting that we can sort of relate to, like people at a research base, and then use that for whatever cosmic horror comes out of it. But I think it's especially interesting whenever a horror series creates an entirely unique world that is so visceral and outside of our realm of understanding that just the thought of it in itself is enough to creep us out. And today I want to bring one of those horrors to you.
Okay, so it's not like a creepypasta, so no one necessarily believes it. It's like a really cool story. Alright, that sounds awesome. I actually
Mystery
wanna
Flesh
I'm ready
Pit
for this.
National Park.
It's
Now,
just such a
this was
crazy name.
originally started by an artist known as Trevor Roberts, who goes by Strange Vehicles on Reddit. And specifically, it began within the subreddit r/world building. It began as a sort of creative exercise of seeing how intricate or heavily put together of a world you could make. However, as you could see, Trevor went way beyond the average or what was required of him and instead created this super expansive universe. That being of a now defunct national park that was made out of a living cave that is potentially a giant hundreds and hundreds mile long creature underneath the earth itself. Not only that, but Trevor was able
Hmm.
to tell this story through a series of brochures and park guides that look like they would be
Oh,
standard of any national
that's
park.
so
So there's
cool.
not only creativity with the world itself, but also the manner in which information is given to us. So today I want to go through some of the details and break down this entire ARG that Trevor has.
Okay, so I don't know much about ARGs, so I guess that's what this is. I think there's some kind of like internet mystery, if I had to guess, because I don't know anything really about them, to be honest. I know a little bit because I've heard of an ARG before.
Crafted. However, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get to every single minute detail, as cool as they all are. So I'm going to leave a link to the original website where all of this information is cataloged for you to find, as well as the artist's Patreon and subreddit, because I'm telling you, this is some wild stuff and you really need to check it out. And
All right,
you know what else you should check out? Today's sponsor that
okay, all right. I'll leave a link to the original artist, his Patreon, and I'll leave a link to Wendigoon's channel and whatever sponsor he has right here.
allows you to save money while shopping for free. Because if you're like me, nowadays online shopping is pretty much all that you do. Like if there's a specific item that I want, I just find it online for the best deal and have it sent to my house. And now those best deals can get even better with Honey. Honey is the online tool that scours the internet for the best promo codes available and helps you save money on your order. Being the #1 shopping tool in America, it is seamless and easy to use. You can get Honey on your computer for free in just 2 easy clicks. Then all you gotta do whenever you're at checkout is hit the apply coupon option, wait a few seconds as Honey scours the internet to find the best promo codes, and then apply it to your order. And if Honey finds a working code, your price will drop with no extra effort to you. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've been ordering pizza with friends and I'm about to do it over the phone and they go, "No, wait, let me do it on the laptop." Because whenever they get to the checkout, Honey pops up, they hit apply, and then we get our pizza for $10 off. And it just doesn't stop there. Everything from shoes to tech to video games or whatever have you,
I always
Honey
wonder how they
does its
make
best
money
to
for
find
this kind of
codes that
stuff.
save you money at no charge to
Advertisement, I
yourself. Take
guess?
it from me
That's my
as
only
someone
guess.
who's used it before. There's nothing more satisfying than whenever you're at a checkout to have your friend pat you on the shoulder and go, "Hey, you want to get $7 off that?" And of course I do. And just saving money as easy as can be. Haha, get it? B, honey, Anyway, so all that you have to do is go to the link in the description at
Yeah, it'll be in my
joinhoney.com
description also.
/Wendigoon to immediately put it on your computer and just start saving cash. Once again, that is joinhoney.com /Wendigoon, and I ask that you please use my link because it lets them know that I sent you, and it helps me and it helps the channel, and I really appreciate it. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much to Honey for sponsoring the video. It means the most. I hope that you check it out. I hope you use the link in the description. I hope you all have a great day, and we are back to the video, which is again 2 feet this way. So just cut back. So without further ado, we are going to go ahead and break down the horror of the Flesh Pit. But first of all, and as always, thank you for watching. So the story of Mystery Flesh Pit National Park is told very non-chronologically. Basically, Trevor will release these incremental posters and pictures that allow us to paint a picture of the world together. So lucky for you all, I already did all that and believe I can track down what the first references to the park, or at least, you know, on a timeline, what the first references to the park can be. We'll break down more of the actual details of what the pit is like, as well as the quite literal anatomy of it later. But right now, we're just getting an introduction to how this thing came to be. In our first letter from James Jackson, also known as Jim Jackson, which we'll see more of later, he writes in a letter to Mr. Colton Fleming explaining the finding of this cave itself. The letter reads, "Dear Colton, now you know more than most how I may be prone to hyperbole on occasion, but those Whitmer boys that called on Monday are on to something amazing. I mean really truly amazing. This isn't any mineral deposit, Colton. At least not like anything I've seen. I went ahead and sent some samples for you and Chris to start looking at. I didn't think you all would believe me if I didn't. This thing that those old boys found is some kind of organic deposit that must go down at least 500 or 600 feet by my reckoning. Not a fungus either. This thing breathes and makes sounds same as any other creature, and it bleeds. God, how it bleeds. Colton, it's a mess out here. John and some of the others think it might be something from outer space. Most of the hombres we brought out to start the excavation call it Diablo de Bajo, and are real weary of going too close to what we figure must be the mouth of this thing. Right now, I don't think I care what it is or where it came from. I'm an oil man, and I think we're on to something real big out here. Once you and Chris start looking at these samples, go ahead and give Lenny a call to send out his crew, and make sure they bring at least 4 excavators. Pay them whatever they ask to make it fast. Also, there's a card in here for a fella in Carlsbad with some pretty heavy-duty spelunking gear. Pay him whatever he wants to get here by Friday or Saturday. I'll call Beverly to have her put out other jobs on hold for the next 3 weeks, but you should remind her anyway. We need to move real fast on this. Dale Whitmer already left this morning to find someone in gumption to come take some photos. It'll be a circus once that happens. God help us if the feds come out and lock it down. There's something about this thing that's important, and I don't want to see something this special get in the hands of some game warden. Regards, James Jackson of Jackson Surveying Incorporated." So as you can see there, it seems that just a normal mining operation or oil drilling operation came across this giant creature hidden underground. Now Jackson was right as to say that this thing underground, whatever they walked into, was actually the mouth of it. Because as we're going to see in a little bit, this thing has entire nervous systems, muscles, and stomach components. And it seems that this agape opening is in fact the mouth of this creature. Now before we get into a lot of the details, or my favorite part, the tourism surrounding the Flesh Pit, I need to go ahead and read the second letter from Jackson as to make sense of this. "Dear Colton, things are really starting to take off down here. At around 3 or so last night, we broke a new depth record of 1,800 feet vertical descent from the maw. It's a damn shame you and the other folks are so spooked by this pit. To be down there in it really is something else. Now don't misunderstand, I'm not saying it's easy. God almighty, is it tough getting around down in its gullet and such. A man's gotta have an iron constitution or a mighty thick skull, and lucky me, the good Lord has seen fit to bless me with both. Some of the boys here have rigged up scuba gear, and we've been able to squeeze around down there with some effort. Giant mussels, giant bones, innards so big you could drive a trailer truck through. Strange critters scuttling around in the dark down there too. Big bugs and germs and worms and other queer things that you wouldn't believe. Some kind of crab thing the size of coyote crept out a week and a half ago, and we caught it crawling around the feed trailer. I got a good look at it before one of Dale's boys shot at it, and it skittered away.
Ew.
We had the funeral for the third roustabout to pass away this month on Tuesday. The papers are already talking gossip more than I like, and I'm hopeful that Bill and the other attorneys can keep the vultures and the feds at bay. People don't understand until they've seen it and been down inside it, Colton. We're pioneers and explorers here. This is good work. This is God's work. Nobody knows what this mystery pit is or what it eats, or how long it's been here. We need some guys with real smarts, not oilmen. Doctors, scientists, and good decent folk who would have nothing to do with us. I'm mighty glad that you've taken responsibility for holding down the fort back home while I'm out here playing the cowboy. You're a good man, Colton, the kind of quality individual they don't make anymore. Maybe I'm hoping I can find some of that goodness myself someday. Maybe down in the belly of this beast. Give Samantha and the baby my regards. Jim Jackson. P.S. There's a company out of Fort Worth that I've called up to help with the exploration. I attached their card to this letter. Give their geologist a call and let them know the details. I'm told they're very good at what they do. And attached we see a business card for the Anodyne Deep Earth Mining Company. Now, Anodyne's going to come up a lot because they're pretty much responsible for everything that happens after this point. So, the pit was discovered in 1973. And as Jackson talked about in the letters, very quickly the local populace as well as the authorities began to grow interest in it because...
duh.
And one of the most interesting things about this story is the immediate rush of consumerism that happens surrounding the pit. See, initially it becomes a competition of what certain groups are going to do with it, but through what you can kind of pick up on as some government influence on Anodyne's behalf, they managed to get the park sanctified as a national park. What that means is that the park itself is treated in the same way the Smokies or Yellowstone would be treated, as in it cannot be destroyed by any newcomers coming in. However, it can be hosted by different companies like restaurants or lounges, and more importantly, Anodyne maintains access to the resources. So the main questions going in at this point is how big is the pit and what exactly did they do to it? And measurements of tissue as far down as they could see initially are about 30 kilometers, which again, probably is close to how deep it actually is. And charts like this one that have the original surveyor's mark show that they mapped it out down to about 4,000 feet. So in other words, it's pretty big. And if you'll pay attention to that part in the second
close to a mile down.
People are not the only creatures alive inside of the living cave itself. As a matter of fact, as you can see on the major parasitic fauna chart, there are several massive...
That is such an interesting, like, depiction. I'm surprised. I wonder how this dude did all this. I assume he outsourced to people to get, like, these drawings done, but this is really good. Unless he's, like, super talented or something with this stuff.
Creatures that people have to worry about. Like, for example, the abyssal sopapod. That's probably not how it's pronounced, but whatever.
Sopapod.
When I initially saw this, I was like, oh, well, what is that? Like a really big beetle like that? And then I was reading in another entry about how they eat people and can grow up to 20 feet long. So in other words, a small school bus that eats people.
Oh my gosh.
Which would mean all these other creatures you can see there are probably much, much bigger than people are. Also beneath several of these posts is a sort of explanation that goes into more detail around whatever's being discussed. So underneath the bug chart, we can see in the description that it reads, this chart and many others like it were produced by Park Service as an educational tool for use in classrooms, museums, and universities. Popular among natural history enthusiasts, The illustrations featured on these posters were the result of an intensive expeditions and surveys into the mystery flesh pit. While visitors are almost certain to encounter common fauna, such as the myriad of macrobacteria subspecies, many organisms such as the Venice shamble and the abyssal sopopod, probably pronouncing that wrong again, tend to evade trails and high traffic areas, making them difficult to spot. As a practical tool, these illustrations were useful in training wildlife management rangers in proper firearm techniques for safely dispatching a dangerous organism. For this reason, the designers of this and other charts attempted to represent the scale of the organisms in relation to each other as accurately as possible. So if you're going into the pit, you better be strapped. And also, like, look at all the detail in these different designs. Like, for example, the lesser sopopod, which looks like a giant tendril shrimp thing, and then the gastric bristleworm, which is huge and terrifying. And there's some more specific entries about some of the lesser known or lesser seen ones. Like, for example, here with the evolution of the amorphous shame pamphlet, which is presented as a sort of brochure for people taking a hike through the trail, you can see the life cycle of something that is believed to be an ancient descendant from a weasel that over time crawled into the cave and slowly lost so many traits of itself, it eventually just became a blob of organs that crawls inside of crevices in the flesh walls of the cave itself and just like absorbs the nutrients, which is and as you'll remember me mentioning earlier, the flesh pit itself became a national park.
It's that big? Holy crap. It looks gross too. That thing is massive.
Hiking and all.
It's like a quarry.
Which means, as pictured on maps like this that show the orifice or mouth of the pit, as well as an interior trail map, people would go on these very long excursions walking through the innards of this creature. And people could visit such amazing sights, such as the northern bronchial forest, which is the sort of lungs of this creature, the amniotic thermal springs, which is something we are going to talk about in a minute, the gastric sea, which is digestive enzymes, or the fondue village, which is bone marrow so large you can walk inside of it, which is a very comforting thought. And some of the dangers that hikers through the park, and I'm going to continue using park, but you know, by park I mean giant flesh underground monster thing. We can see in the wildlife safety pamphlet some of the things people hiking would have to worry about. Like with the introduction, it says your visit to the mystery flesh pit can be a most pleasurable and rewarding experience, or it can be a time of vexation, distress, or even tragedy. Much depends on how you and your family observe these simple guidelines and avoid designated hazards. Take a minute to read these simple but important safety rules, then go on to a pleasant park experience. I also want to mention all of these pamphlets, as well as everything that I'm going to mention that's been industrialized within the park, has been done by the Anodyne Corporation. Visitors and wildlife within the mystery flesh pit often frequent the same areas within the park. It is likely that park wildlife and visitors will encounter one another, but by remaining calm and following the basic advice of experienced veteriobiologists, you increase the odds of a positive outcome for both yourself and the wildlife. All visitors who partake on self-guided excursions beyond reinforced and enclosed trails within the mystery flesh pit are required to attend an orientation at the lower visitor center. During this orientation, a park ranger will inform you about areas that are closed to visitors due to high fauna activity or recent wildlife-human encounters. It is important to be aware when camping and hiking within the mystery flesh pit to avoid wildlife foraging areas, chimal deposits, gastric bladders, surface wildlife carcass mounds, etc. So not only do you have to worry about the giant bug things that are essentially this creature's immune system, but you have to worry about the creature itself digesting you. We'll talk about that in a minute, but a final thought on encountering these things. It says at the end of the pamphlet, if you see flora or fauna within the park and it does not appear to notice you, back out of sight and change your course. Move out of the area or quietly observe at a safe distance without approaching or otherwise disturbing it. Disturbance is evident whenever wildlife change their behavior because of you. If it stops eating and looks up / raises its antennas or secretes scent enzymes or begins making territorial clicks while trying to locate you, you are too close. While many life forms within the pit seem to be
This is
tolerant of
scary.
human presence at a distance further than 200 yards, each creature is different. Use telephoto lenses and endoscopes where possible. Allow migrating bacterial colonies to pass by your camp undisturbed. If you have made sure that the wildlife is aware of your presence so it is not surprised and have kept all your gear under your direct control, allow any organism you encounter to travel unhindered. You may just be afforded the opportunity to safely observe these amazing creatures in their natural environment. Yeah, these giant 20-foot tall shrimp things that eat people, just don't panic and just let them walk by your camp. Which I guess, like, their resistance to gunshots is mentioned earlier, but I guess that's all you can do. Also, not only mentioned here, but in other places, it seems all the creatures within the pit itself is blind, which makes sense because before we opened up the hole into the mouth of this thing, it was entirely underground, and everywhere throughout the pit is just pitch black. So none of these creatures use eyesight, it's all sound and pheromone tracing. So remember how just a second ago I said that the pit or park itself can eat you? They know that can happen because it's happened. On one of the deeper trails through the park itself, you can come across something known as the circus clown chimus. The description of it reads as though it may look like a colorful ice cream birthday cake covered in a glazed frosting, this calcified formation is anything but festive. In 1976, a group of performers accidentally fell into the upper maw of the entry orifice. While the soft flesh of the pit throat somewhat cushioned the performer's fall, the unexpected dilation of an epiglottal fold allowed them to slide down into a then unreinforced area of the pit. Rescue personnel were able to locate the performers inside a digestive sac a few hours later. But by that time, all 50 stunts people had already begun being digested by the pit. Rescue personnel cut them out, correctly guessing that many were still alive. An experimental antacid spray was discharged on top of the gooey, shrieking mound, but it was too late. Instead of reducing the acidic effects of the partially digested bodies of the performers, the experimental compound flash calcified into the multicolored formation that you see in front of you. Though hauntingly
it's dead
beautiful,
people.
the circus clown chimus is a somber reminder of why it is always important to observe all safety instructions and to always stay on the marked trails while visiting the interior of the mystery flesh pit. So, a group of clowns were performing above the flesh pit itself because people are going to be stupid, and then 50 of them fell into the pit, couldn't be located for hours, and when they did locate them, they were trapped inside of a digestive enzyme sac, like a giant lysosome. And then when they cut them out, they were all melted together and screaming and shrieking and then froze like that. And they just left it there. And then they had the audacity to call it hauntingly beautiful, which no, it's not, it's just haunting. But despite all of this, people still visit the park. And while reading this, at the first moment, I'm like, that's dumb. They wouldn't. And then I thought for 3 seconds, and I'm
They
like,
would.
yeah, they probably would. So once Anodyne had the initial park opened up, or at least the central part of it, that's when the advertising began. Such as this poster for the park itself, which says, discover verdant forest, majestic scenery, and cosmic terror. Enjoy legendary trout fishing, geotonic carnal moans, broken philosophy, backcountry hiking, and camping. I love the broken philosophy because, yeah, where's your God now? A lot of the supplemental material you can read on your own is about how it was hard for businesses to at first sell the idea of the flesh pit because, people were reasonably afraid. So one of the things they did was they came up with this mascot called Caver Coop, who would do these animated sort of Looney Tune style films talking about going through the cave and why it's really not something to be afraid of, in a sort of propaganda technique. And they would have several events, and some catered towards children, like Caver Coop's Spooky Halloween Carnival, where among the activities for children to perform is haunted hay rides, campfire stories, safe trick-or-treating, and blood. Because if there's one thing this giant cave has a lot of,
It's blood.
it's interesting with these, a lot of the brutality that occurs behind the scenes, just for all of the happy sort of national park vibes that are put on the display. Like for example, in one letter called Experiences of a Flesh Pit Mine Worker, a mine worker writes to a child telling them what it's like to work for Anodyne in the flesh pit, where essentially a full crew of people work outside of this giant mining rig that works as a boring machine cutting through the cave. And by cutting through, I don't mean in the way that like other things dig through rock. I mean quite literally it's hacking and slashing and there's blood everywhere and it's insane. In describing to the boy how the rig works, he says ideally the rig cuts as it goes, leaving a burnt cauterized path through the meat while also crushing and processing any minerals it runs through. In the real world, the pit isn't uniform, and you end up running into all kinds of obstacles requiring interventional solutions, or the brass up top decide that they don't want you just cutting through certain parts of the anatomy. So you suit up and get out ahead of the rig to poke and prod and pry at a walking pace. 8 hours a day for weeks at a time. Rigs have a big hydraulic arms that reach forward and push, lift, and splay open organs or muscle bundles before us roustabouts would go in and suck up or
That's what a
hose out
roustabout
any
is.
blood,
Just a
cut
miner,
tendons,
essentially, I guess.
cauterized tissue, rinse, and repeat. So while you're thinking that whatever's going on may harm this creature, this thing is so big, it's the equivalent of having like a zit, basically, everything that these people are doing. And as you can see from diagrams like this with the park trail engineer, some of the places inside of the pit
Looks
are
like an
so
astronaut.
tight or so inhospitable because you're in a giant immune system basically that you have to wear these full body suits and put these stents up everywhere that you go so that the muscles don't collapse in and crush you to death. And vehicles like the Park Ranger utility vehicle shows you what you need in order to traverse through this myriad of guts. I also like a lot of these smaller touches that he puts into the world building, like for example this necklace that was taken off of a mine worker that says, "A flesh pick worker's prayer. Each day I descend into the deep, cutting meat to earn my keep. Pray to my Father in heaven above that I return to those I love. If somehow death and I should meet, as even the flesh pit needs to eat, I want my loved ones to be sure that in Jesus' arms I am secure." And it's an interesting way to combine these
Really cool.
West Texas vibes, of which the pit itself takes place in, with this horrific cosmic Lovecraftian horror that the authors built. And it is dangerous. You can see in several of the different designs that are posted on here, trail engineers, surveyors, and commercial mine technicians, all these need these massive spacesuits. And there's even special weapons shown, like the Anatomical Environment Multi-Tool, or AEM, which was made to shoot spikes into walls in order to hoist the walls of the cave so you can walk through it, but they later realized was really good at taking out these giant lobster things that attack the workers. So you may be asking, all these workers, all these miners, like understandably it's a park, but what are they looking for? And the answer is all sorts of stuff. Like using chemicals and enzymes found within the cave, Anodyne became this multi-conglomerate corporation that made things from laundry cleaner over to powerful computers that use the nerve fibers of the cave walls as a means of processing information, and things like Coke Heartthrob, which is a special flavor of Coke that has some very special abilities. As the description reads on that, it says Coke Heartthrob was first introduced on Valentine's Day in 1985 as a limited promotion, but sold so well over the summer that Coca-Cola added it to their primary beverage roster in 1986. The defining ingredient in Coke Heartthrob was, of course, amniotic ballast, harvested from special glands deep within the mystery flesh pit. The potent aphrodisiacal properties of amniotic ballast were diminished by heavily diluting the chemical before adding it to the beverage, but Coke Heartthrob still developed a notorious reputation for its unusual intoxicating effects. So remember earlier how I said there's the amniotic pools that we're going to mention later? This is the part where I mentioned them. So hidden deep within the cave, they found something that they believe is a part of the creature's endocrine system known as the amniotic thermal springs. And it turns out these things have insane healing properties. We see images of how this is used as a treatment for Alzheimer's or better aging in the elderly, as well as being used for cancer treatment and all sorts of different illnesses. There are several spas in and around the pit that use this amniotic ballast as a source of physical healing. On the Mystery Below Journey pamphlet, among all the different lounging and dining options we see, like the Marriott Hotel that they have, or the Hard Rock Cafe located just outside of the pit, and even things like the IMAX Theater, we can see the advertisement for the amniotic thermal springs. It says on there, located on the ground floor of the visitor center, by the vending machines are the amniotic baths. So this is above surface before you go into the pit. Amniotic secretions are pumped from glands deep within the pit for visitors who are unable to descend into the pit. These springs are known to have a range of positive effects on human psychology, physiology, and well-being, and are enjoyed both medicinally and recreationally. Note, as the visitor center is a family-friendly facility, the surface spring baths are diluted to a 1:20 potency ratio with filtered water. For higher concentrations within adult-only baths, park guests are encouraged to visit the pleasure domes located east of the lower visitor center complex within the Mystery Flesh Pit. Okay, so these amniotic things are used as aphrodisiacs in Coke, and it says here that they are heavily diluted in the park itself because it's a family-friendly atmosphere. Or I should say within the hotel itself, in the park, they're not diluted at all. For those that don't know, an aphrodisiac is something that gets you in the mood. And if you were curious how effective of an aphrodisiac this stuff is, in the chart that shows us details of the amniotic thermal springs itself, we can see a spring potency chart. Now, essentially, remember this is a giant creature, the thermal springs are these glands that you can walk through the canals of and bathe inside of these giant hot tubs, essentially made out of enzymes, and all the different nodes of this gland act as different bathhouses. On the chart for the spring potency, you can see that there is a green line, and for the green line it says visitors are encouraged to consult a physician before entering baths below the green line, because it can have different effects on your well-being. And then the yellow line on the super potent baths, the most potent of which being the libido bath, it says visitors are encouraged to consult a religious, mystic, or sexual wellness counselor before entering baths below the yellow line, because the more potent this stuff is, the more in the mood you get. It says that outside of the main bath, which remember is very, very diluted, users have to be 18 years old to go into the main baths. Also, because you can't bring any clothing in there, you have to be naked, because of course you do. It even says on this chart, a secondary and infamous property of amniotic spring fluid are the psychoactive and aphrodisiacal effects it has on those who consume or topically apply it. Bathers describe a gentle euphoric sensation when soaking in higher potency springs, with the effects of concentrated exposure being well documented by several best-selling short films, many of which are available for purchase by request in the Upper Visitor Center gift shop. Beyond the physical sensations, visitors often claim that they develop deep emotional bonds with those they interact with while inside the thermal springs. So you go inside the nodes of this giant monster thing underground and fall in love, which is a story as old as time. Also, looking at this chart, I just noticed a bottle of water is $13 down here. Oh my gosh, that is price gouging. That's the real horror of this whole thing. These horrible.
Hey, don't worry, it's getting it's starting to get there, man.
Gouging, my word. Anyway, also looking at this node chart, there is a small sort of squishy node that comes off to the side, and it says undeveloped ballast bulb. Visitors are encouraged to experience the traditional bathing process by crawling into the bulb orifice. No thank you. And
Yeah,
then
that
over
sounds
the side,
horrible.
you
Sounds
can
like
see
you would.
pumps.
That sounds like you would accidentally kill yourself, essentially. That's horrible.
That work as a way of pumping this amniotic fluid to the surface. What's interesting is reading the final paragraph of this entire chart. It says amniotic spring fluid is safe to eat and drink and has enjoyed limited exposure as an additive to a variety of popular consumer foodstuffs, such as the seasonally available Coca-Cola Heartthrob, Feel Good McFlurry, and even a ballast-based cordial liquor. And if you'll remember what I talked about at the beginning, this is a since shut down national park, and it was shut down over a specific event that happened that we're going to talk about in a minute. Now, several may be curious as to what the actual layout of the park is. As far as the hiking routes go, it says several of the different routes you can go on. For example, the Bowels of the Earth route, it says the basic tour through the Mystery Flesh Pit. It is a 7.85 mile self-guiding stroll through many large and famous features like the Thor's Ribcage, Septum Falls, God's Mistake, and Oyster's Shame. Then there's some more adventurous ones you can go on. There's some guided ones by a ranger that you have to go through, where you pretty much have to crawl through these really tight like blood vessel things, which also in the description for one of those tours, known as the Swallowed Hole Tour, it says, note, this tour is not recommended to those who suffer from claustrophobia or a fear of being eaten alive, also known as those with common sense. What's also interesting that you can find while looking through this is several of the park signs that are shown. Like for example, this one that says, notice respiratory mucosal folds are unmarked, exercise caution to avoid entrapment, because you can walk into the cilia of one of these things and get absorbed. Now, if you were to be absorbed, what might happen to you? And I assure you now, the answer is not good. See, on the identifying wildlife pamphlet earlier, there was one specific creature called compound surface fauna. And the description says, on rare occasions, abyssal whatever that word is, and other park wildlife will venture outside of the pit and will pull surface animals such as deer, livestock, coyotes, and rabbits into the
I didn't know stuff came out.
If not eaten by park fauna, these animals may undergo a fascinating phenomenon known as anatomical amalgamation. This process, which is not fully understood by park scientists, results in the creation of a compound organism, which is a hybrid of constituent surface animals. No two of these amalgamations are the same, though the resulting physiology often results in similar conditions such as partial fusing of major body elements and relocation of internal organs to locations on the exterior of the body. Because of the gruesome and seemingly haphazard nature of the combinations, many compound surface fauna do not live beyond a few hours or days from the time they are discovered. Should you encounter a shambling compound surface fauna, please do not feed it or otherwise engage in activity which could prolong its suffering. And then the most terrifying note in red at the bottom, in the extremely unlikely event that you encounter an amalgamation containing one or more human constituent organisms, contact a park ranger immediately via one of the emergency telephones installed along trail routes. And in horrific images like this and descriptions around it, we can see what happened to those people. It says, while HIPAA and similar regulations prevent me from finding out exactly how many people even suffered amalgamation, it's estimated that fewer than half a dozen ever survived the treatment process to recovery. Recovery, though, is a loaded word here. The treatment co-developed by Baylor Medical Center and Anodyne Corporation was highly dependent on the nature of the amalgamation and seems to have been most successful with combined masses containing only human tissue. The procedure for treatment involved removing the brain and as much of the spinal cord as possible from the amalgamation. When possible, extraction of other organs such as eyes, cochlear tissue, tongues, and larynx would later enable the recovered patient a sensory experience much closer to that which they had previously enjoyed, since medical technology is even still unable to replicate the organic sensory quality of human sensory tissues. However, the difficulty and cost of this additional procedure all but ensured that this rarely took place. Once extracted, the brain of the individual patient would be placed in a nutrient salve, and connected to a proprietary interface and life support system developed by Anodyne Company. A rudimentary, computer-based system could be used to communicate with the recovered patient after several months of therapy, and in some cases, individuals were reported able to use vocoders to synthesize speech. It is unknown how many, if any, of these individuals are still living today. So, most likely, through the cilia in the wall that it said do not get stuck into, you get mushed together with a bunch of other stuff that also got stuck in the walls and become these blob creatures that they try to harvest some organs from to keep you kind of alive. I hate it here. But those visitors that still decide to go in through.
Okay, we're gonna stop it there for this part. Yeah, I'm gonna do 2 parts, and yeah, the second part I'm sure will be out in a couple days. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.